Okay. Thank you. Welcome to the Wednesday, November 15th, 2023 Garrison Board of Education regular workshop business meeting. Dusty, will you call the roll, please?
Jocelyn Abasello.
Here.
David Gilbert.
Here.
Jennifer Harrington Wilson.
Here.
Dan Jasnow.
Here.
Courtney McCarthy.
Here.
Ken Shaw.
Excused.
Sarah Torney.
Here.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Next up, we have accept agenda changes. Don't have any recommended changes for this evening. We did make a couple changes today for committee presentations, and we did need to move the pre-K kindergarten, which moved to December to staff. I will update it as due to the family issue. But that will be coming in December. Any other? All right. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby accept the agenda as presented. May I have a motion? Oh, okay. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. Great. Now we're moving on to board communications and presentations. We're going to begin with the New York State test results for grades 3 through 8 and test results from our Regents exam. All right. Ms. Reed, come on up. Voting's all yours.
All right. I have the exciting part. Data. This what captures the.
Yeah. All right. What am I looking? Okay.
Hi, how's everybody? Are you ready to hear about data? That exciting stuff? We actually did really well, so I'm super excited. So I'm going to present to you a little bit about the New York State standardized ELA exams and the math exams, and then I'm going to also share with you a little bit about the Regents and how we fared and how well we're doing. So we can just go to the next slide. Oh, it's all me? Oh, I thought it was Dusty controlling. Like she helps me with everything lately. Okay, so it's all me. This is actually great. Okay, so last year our kids did participate in the ELA and math, and they also participated in Regents. I'm excited that our kids are continuing to participate, all kids in the living environment Regents, which is a real big push for us, and it's been incredibly successful, and I'll show you that. And also excited about the math Regents, because a large portion of our kids are also taking the algebra Regents exam. So the results have been really amazing. Last year, we did not take science 4 and 8. They revamped that, and this year there will be a science test in grades 5 and 8. And now we can, oh, me advance the slide. You see, I'm so used to somebody else driving. Okay, so a little bit about the demographics. We're such a small school. We know who our kids are. That's the benefit of being in Garrison. It's our biggest strength, I think, that we have a tiny school. And you can see that we have, it's not huge, it's not very diverse in nature, but we do have a variation of all different students that come to us. In particular, we have a larger portion of students with disabilities in comparison to some of the other demographic groups. And you know what, most of our kids are white, and we have fewer students of color. And this is really, I think, playing a role in the results that you see in our tests. And there are some things that I definitely want to address and speak to tonight, just in ways in which we can sort of address some of the differences that you see within the population of our students. So when you look at the data, I just want us to, I'm going to remind everyone that year to year, the data is not entirely valid. So a couple of years ago, when the pandemic was, you know, in full blown here, we did not give any of the state tests. And then the year after, there were shortened versions of the test. And so naturally, the results of the test from year to year are very discrepant. So it's not necessarily valid to look at it year to year. But over the course of 3 years, so last year, this upcoming year, and the year following, we'll be able to really see a trend where the ELA and the math exams were given with more fidelity. They were given entirely, not in small portions like in the past. And we'll be able to really, I think, make better judgments about our kids' progress from year to year, really looking at last year, the year prior, and this upcoming year. So over the next few years, we'll be able to really look at the data, and I think, it'll give us more information. We were happy to see that 86% of our kids participated last year in the state test. We had a big opt-out rate when I first got here, and even years prior, opting out was like a big deal. Many kids just said, I'm not taking it. I remember back when my child was in 7th grade, I said, how the test go? He's like, I didn't take it. I opted myself out. I was like, what? What did you mean you opted yourself out? I didn't give you permission to do that. He's like, I just didn't take it. So like kids, I think, have that perception that they can just tell their parents that I'm not taking it. They'd show up to school the day of the test, and I would get like emails from parents, oh yeah, my child's not taking it. I think it was just like a mindset. But this year in particular, this past year, we had 86% of the kids that came in and they were ready, prepared to take it. And that's like it's a different mindset, a different shift. So I think they're like, as much as we don't want to put all our, eggs in this one basket of state testing, I think kids and teachers recognize that there is some value to state testing, but it is just a snapshot and it's just one measure. So, but kids did take it very seriously this year. We also want to consider the social emotional wellness of students when they're taking tests, especially over the past, I think, few years in particular with the pandemic and the recovery from the pandemic. There was a lot of testing anxiety. I think over the years, some kids really didn't feel as well equipped or prepared to take state tests, or any test by that matter. So the social emotional well-being of students really needs to be considered when we're really looking at these tests, because on the day of the test, you could have a student completely in shambles that day, and it might not fare well for them. So we really look at all of these things. And then of course, we have to consider, this is a small school, 20, let's say 5 kids in a class. And, we might have in one particular grade, a class that has no students with disabilities. And then there might be a class that has 5 or 6 students with disabilities within that, classroom. And that's not to mention other neurodivergences that might exist within the classroom that are not classifiable, but are conditions that might play a role in the academic performance and how they fare, especially on a state test. So these are all considerations that I want us to keep in mind when I present the data. Each parent receives a parent report when we get the results, and the parent report has so many numbers and explanations of what these numbers mean, and it's really sometimes hard for parents to digest and really understand. So basically what we try to explain to parents, and this happens oftentimes at a parent-teacher conference, where the teacher will explain what a level 2 means versus a level 3. And there's a cutoff score. So if a student scores a high 2, that means they're like almost proficient. And they're not quite there yet, and they might be eligible for response to intervention so that they can receive some supports in school and kind of inch them toward the proficient range, which is a score of a 3. So we're always aiming to have our students hover in that area of a 3. Of course, naturally, we love when students can perform at a 4. That's not always the case. And so we try to kind of walk through what this score report really means in terms of reading comprehension. And sometimes the test format will test reading comprehension in multiple ways. So it'll be multiple choice sections, or maybe a short answer and it's in a written response. So ways in which student is expressing and showing, demonstrating their knowledge, they might be stronger in the written portion to show their knowledge, and they just tank in multiple choice, because multiple choice can be very tricky for kids trying to kind of tease out what the right answer is. It's really hard to do. That's it's a skill that we teach kids on how to do, eliminating the the right answers, the bad answers to arrive at the correct answer. Those are hard skills. but the testing format and how it's delivered really matters, and you can see it in the score report. So we try to explain to parents, you know, how to read these. A high 2 sometimes doesn't always mean that a child can qualify for a response to intervention. There's a cutoff score, so a child can receive a 2 and be, you know, considered almost at grade level. They're right there, and that would be like a tier 1 intervention, which means the classroom teacher would be really cognizant and really zeroing in on any student who receives at that cutoff score and below, to boost their skills and really use this as a tool to help figure out what gaps might be in their learning. So it's broken down. We have a couple of things to show you the year to year, where we're lumping all the kids, grades 3, 5 in ELA, and then you'll see grades 6 through 8 in ELA. So you can see at 2020, no testing was done. 2021 in ELA, only a small portion of the test was given, so it looks like 80%. They did awesome. Yeah, that's great, but they only had the multiple choice section and they didn't have the written
I'm
portion.
sorry to interrupt you. Is that who's the percentage that's scoring proficient?
So this is yes. So in 2021, these are the scores where 61%, in 2022 is proficient. And then in 2023, 70% proficient. And then you can see in grades 6 through 8, 85% and 83%. So this is the proficiency. And then this is a chart that just shows it laid out a little differently, where you can see all grades and you can see how well they've done in terms of their proficiency, ELA, for all, let's see, grade 4. Looks like they did really well in comparison to grade 5. So grade 5, they're 6th graders right now. So that we want to ask them questions. Like, I'm wondering, why perhaps they were much lower in grade 5 than grade 6. And that looks like to me, like, wow, an anomaly or something. Like, but what is it? What's the root of that? And again, this is a snapshot. When I looked over at math, you can see that they did really well in math, but they didn't do as a group as well in ELA. But then if you look at the middle school is like sort of like soaring there. And it's really interesting for me because I know in 8th grade, they did the first year of computer-based testing in 8th grade. So I'm wondering, did that help them because they're so proficient at, keyboarding? And is that why they did so well? In addition to, of course, extraordinary teaching in the middle school. And of course, the kids are they come with a lot of knowledge that they bring to the table each day. So overall, the ELA scores, the proficiencies, I think we're in the right direction. There is a particular cohort that we're just looking at a little bit more closely, and we're considering everything. We broke it down by gender, and I thought this was pretty interesting because you can see that there's like a gender gap here, that our girls seem to be performing in ELA, a little bit better. So again, I when I see this, and James, showed this to me the other day, and I was like, wow, that's really interesting when you see that, because it makes you ask, like, well, why is it that girls seem to be outperforming the boys in ELA? Research says that at an early age, that girls linguistically can develop and acquire vocabulary quicker than boys. There's some research on that. But it makes me start to think about our DEI initiatives. It makes me start to think about our curriculum and the relevance, and are we not reaching our boys? Is the material that we're using not grabbing them? Like, again, this is great conversation with our teachers to really kind of tease out why such a gap between the girls and the boys.
Does that track with national numbers?
It does. It does. So I was on this early evening, and I was just trying to research, and I'm learning that it seems that this is like a trend where the girls are outperforming the boys.
It hasn't always been true.
I guess it has been true. I was just talking to Carl, and he was like telling me that in a recent article that he read, that there's like what is it, 60% of college students are now girls. And they're like, kids going into college now are mostly girls in this generation right now. It's just, I mean, it's just interesting to me. It makes me, really want to sit with the teachers and really kind of dig into the curriculum. What are kids doing after school? What are their work habits? Stereotypes that come into play. There's a lot of stereotypes that I think that we bring to the table, and we don't necessarily do it deliberately, but there's this, boys are math and science and girls seem to be more linguistic. So does that come into play and have a consideration, that we need to kind of think about? I know motivation, attitudes towards ELA. Again, I'm not sure. These are just things that I'm thinking out loud, just my own little notes, but it is something that's presenting and showing in the data. And I think it's worth, a conversation. For math, we have a new math program, and we are in the 3rd year of the math program. And this is the year I think that we're going to really start to see, I think, some movement. And you can see, again, this is the whole group, grades 3 through 5 and 6 through 8. And this is where they're falling in terms of like passing and being proficient on the state test. I want to just mention that in 8th grade, most of the students did take the algebra exam, and only, I believe, 3 students took the actual 8th grade math state test. So it's such a tiny group that it's not, it's to quantify it and put it on a table. It's kind of hard because it's only representative of a few kids. But you can see on this graph, all the grades are listed here, and you can see Math 8 looks very low, but that's representative of a couple of students because most of the kids took algebra, which is not on this graph. It's separate. This is the state test. So I'm really happy with like the movement in terms of mathematics and kids acquiring the foundational skills and the real world application skills. There's obviously still room to grow, but overall the kids are, I think, really taking to the new math program because it has such a definitive scope and sequence of skills that's mapped out from, K through 8th grade. You're seeing, and I'm seeing like the common language and the common themes throughout grade to grade. So when I was in 3rd grade a couple of days ago watching a math lesson, and then yesterday I was in March's 2nd grade class, I was like, wow, okay, I see now how amazing the kids were doing in 3rd grade because of what I just saw in 2nd grade and the carryover and the common language and the way each lesson is laid out. The kids know what to expect, and it spirals so nicely. So I think, we're going to really continue to see, I think, this gap kind of close and our kids continue to do really well in mathematics. We pulled this apart in terms of the gender, and in previous years, James and I were talking about this today, and I was like, oh, I want to go back into the data to look, and I wish I had it for tonight. But historically, our girls were not doing as well, and we're like really, the boys were really kind of outshining and outperforming us in mathematics. And I'm really pleased to see that that gap is really closing. And we can see our kids are doing nicely at, and the proficiency is, 3s and 4s, they're right there, kind of neck and neck. So it's closing. In terms of the Regents exams, we have 100% pass rate for algebra and for living environment. Living environment, all 28 kids took it, which we're really super excited about. You can see that the mastery from 1 year from 22 to 23 in living environment, 70% of our kids last year were at mastery level, that they were just like unbelievable. They were solid. But all kids passed and did exceptionally well. But a large portion of our kids were at the mastery level.
I don't understand the green bar.
So the green bar is just showing that 100% of the kids passed.
That was the passing rate.
That's that, yeah, 100% passing
So
rate.
then,
And then
right.
70% of the kids were at mastery level. So,
Mastery's 85 or higher.
yes, yes, so it's
but
like,
wouldn't the mastery level be higher than the passing bar or the percentages?
which passing bar are you talking about?
So green is the passing bar. Or that's
The passing, the green is up there 100%, like all kids passed. 100% of the kids passed. Not everybody was considered at the mastery level, like,
Got it.
not all kids scored like, let's say a 4, we're gonna put a 4 as mastery, but 70% of the kids were at that highest bracket of mastery. And then 50 from the year prior, it was 50%. Same thing like in algebra. So we had 100% of the kids, they all passed, but 21% of the kids were at that high level of mastery, 21%, but all of them were able to pass. So you can see that from year to year that the mastery level is increasing and all kids are passing, which is wonderful. In years prior, the algebra class was pretty much split down the middle where they had the cohort split pretty evenly. So it'd be like, 12 kids in one class and 12 kids in another. And what we've been doing is trying to encourage kids to challenge themselves and take algebra and as long as they can, hang in there and do, there's a criteria to get into algebra. Some kids fall into that kind of gray area and they want to challenge themselves and say, yes, go for it. And last year we had 19 kids in it versus like 10 or 12 kids. So that's something that we're very excited about. The kids are wanting to challenge themselves. So some things that we're putting in place that have already been in place that we're continuing, added instructional time to the core subject areas. That's also, it wasn't just at the middle school level where the periods are 51 minutes. They went from 42 minutes to 51, but that's also even at the elementary level that the core subject time periods have increased. That we are in the 3rd year of the math implementation for Envisions Math, and we're really excited about what that's going to continue to provide our students. It's hard. It's definitely a rigorous program, and the kids and the teachers, I think they're doing a really nice job with that. It's so chock full. There's so much, a lot of like pieces of intervention that coincide with that program that have been very helpful to our RTI teachers as well, and our special education team. We have Mr. Roman, who does some in-school and after-school supports for mathematics. There isn't a single day where his room is not filled during his lunch period, and then he offers after-school time as well for all kids. Toward the middle of the school year, he offers strictly like an algebra regions prep class, and then he offers also for students who are in general 8 math, and then of course for his 6th through 7th graders. Krista, for his other math classes. Krista DiDiego is also going to be hosting an after-school program as well to help kids. It's not necessarily going to be geared toward homework help, but it's really kind of the social emotional well-being and keeping them moving and going and having the right mental space and attitude to tackle their work. So she's going to be hosting that after school, and it will help to facilitate homework, but it's really kind of tied to emotional well-being. We are going to be really looking at our reading programs. That's another push for us. In particular, the science of reading, and really looking at our pre-K through 3rd grade curriculum and reading. And our teachers currently, our special education team, will be having some professional development. It's really to kind of enhance their skill set with strategies for reading and for writing. So they're going to be doing that in December. We have a report card committee that we put together. So we're in the middle of revising our report card so that it reflects the standards, a standards-based report card. universal diagnostic screenings. We're using the Envisions diagnostics that are within the Envisions program. We have our STAR map in reading, which is super beneficial. It's our local assessment that we use that helps to give us more information so that we can track students' progress over time. And we give that benchmarked 3 times a year. Sometimes we do it more, depending on if students are in RTI. We use it to give us more information to see if kids are moving in the right direction. And if they need to exit out of RTI, we use that as a benchmark that helps us make that decision. Or if they need more intervention, we use that. Our FNP, which is Fontes and Pinnell, and that is a benchmark that we use for determining how well they're doing in reading, their overall reading fluency, their reading comprehension, pieces of writing, and we do that 3 times a year. Again, this is just in an effort to collect as much data as we can on students, in addition to their classroom data that they get, their proficiency tests in school, their summative assessments that are given, and then we use that information to help guide our instruction and also to inform what would be the best interventions. Sometimes an intervention for our kids is really going to be an enrichment. And we can't forget about the students who are off the charts and who are beyond the 4 on a test and all of these other assessments. We really have to pay close attention to those students as well. The interventionists and our special education teachers currently right now are doing and delivering the RTI services for students. And we also, actually, our social studies teacher, Chrissy Valvano, is also an interventionist now. She just started working with 4th and 5th graders, and she's been really focusing on writing and their written expression in relation to reading and writing off of nonfiction and fiction. So she's been unbelievable, like just having her as a resource in RTI as well. And then, of course, all of this data is used to help identify student needs, and it's used to adjust our programs and, in our instruction. And I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions if anybody's have any.
I don't have a question, but I would like to encourage you. You mentioned, first of all, thank you very much. A very informative report. For me personally, as a data person, having the number of students as opposed to just the percentages would help me better understand the growth over time.
Perfect.
So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
But also in your presentation, you talked about like you really want students to hover around a 3 on the state testing.
Well,
So that's proficient.
Right.
So I would like to encourage you to think about having all students reach a 4, and to ask this board to provide you resources to ensure that that can happen. Right, because I think we're such a small school, and if you look at comparative data, I don't know, Mr. Albano, if you have access to School Meter.
We have a
So I would encourage you highly to look at comparative schools and School Meter, so that we are at least beating what the other schools typical because of our size.
I like it.
Advantage. And I'd like to see us be shooting for 4s for everything.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And when I say I want kids to hover at a 4, like I'm wanting my kids to at least get that 4, and I'm looking at all of our students.
But you said
But
a 3. Good.
I'm sorry. I'm misspeaking. I want our kids to at least get that 3 and not stay at a 3. And that's why I mentioned before that we're paying attention to all the kids, even the kids that are at the 4. How can we make them even better? Like I agree with you 100%. I'm with you that I want to make sure that each child is reaching their full potential. I don't want to say that this child's a 1 or this is a 2 and but we're looking at this data. So I'm like speaking in kind of numbers right now. Every child needs to really reach their potential and get there. And it's our job to figure out how they're going to get there. And I agree that we might need more resources. We might.
I have one question on the region specifically.
Yeah.
How do those courses set the students up for high school? Specifically, when you have a mastery, Does it allow you to enter into a different type of science course versus a non-mastery? How is that playing into their course selection going forward at our 3 high schools?
Well, I know that not all 3 high schools, I believe, offer the same like progression, so it could look different. So, you know, if they're entering into high school and they are going to go into earth science, it could be different. They might be going into a different science class, but it's, for me, in terms of like science, it depends on what class they're going to. With math, again, like they could go into geometry from my understanding. I know that we are here offering for any student right now who is at that level where we want to encourage them to continue on with challenging themselves. We are offering, which we sort of set a criteria for some students in 8th grade to pursue looking into challenging themselves in geometry, because that might be the pathway next for them. And rather than, you know, going into an algebra class but the next step for them would be geometry. And, you know, I'm excited for that opportunity for some of our kids. It's a small portion, but again, it's pushing them in that direction and giving them that opportunity.
And then one more question. When you talk about the changes to reading in pre-K and 3rd, are there specific things you're looking at right now, specifically with the special education interactionist teachers?
I think for me and for what we've discussed as a team is just making sure that we're doing our reading instruction with more fidelity and consistency, with teaching kids how to read, you know, using phonics and just, you know, phonics instruction, phonemic awareness, teaching vocabulary, teaching background knowledge, making sure students are fluent readers. Because when they get into 3rd grade, even 2nd grade, the reading is heavy and it becomes very challenging. Texts become more complex. So that's an area that I really want to pay closer attention to. We have math is really kind of underway. I'm not going to be paying attention to math. ELA is an area in which we want to really kind of delve into. The teacher college units sometimes can be really challenging for some of our students with disabilities. And so lots of additional scaffolds need to be built in for our students with disabilities, which is our job. That's what we do. But again, like there's professional development coming up to help to kind of support that process for teachers, to help students to raise the bar and reach that. But I think the foundation of reading is so critical. And that's an area that I believe can really be strengthened.
Thank you. Welcome. Any other questions for Allison before we move on? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Up next on presentations, we have an overview of the transportation proposition vote with Mr. Jimmick.
Okay, so we have a vote, a special meeting and a vote coming up on December 5th. And we'll talk about why that is. It has to do with transportation. So why are we doing a vote? So school districts are required to transport all K-8 students that are 2 miles or more than 2 miles from school, and all high school students who are more than 3 miles away from school. Any transportation for students that are under those limits requires a voter approval. Okay, so we did a exhaustive search, and Dusty kind of really spearheaded this, looking at our internal records and old newspaper archives, and we haven't found any evidence that the public has ever approved transportation for students who live less than 2 or 3 miles away from school. So not finding a evidence of that is why we're doing a vote now. If a majority of the voters support transporting students that reside any distance from school, the district will be authorized to maintain and offer these services. So the district is currently doing it now. And this is not uncommon that school districts do this. But in order for us to make it so it's fixed and it cannot be challenged, it needs to be put to a public vote. So this is what is going to be on the ballot on December 5th. So shall the board be authorized to transport all students regardless of the distance they live from school? And which additional transportation currently costs $16,200.
If I asked quickly, I proposed some changes to the language. Did that get incorporated in? Or
The
discussed
ballots
that?
have already been printed and gone out for absentees, so at this point, they can't change the language of the proposition and the board voted on the specific language. It was run up to council, which I believe you saw the response. So at this point, what we could do though, if there's a point you wish to clarify, which is what I think you were getting at, is to make sure people understand what this legal language means. Joe, correct me if I'm wrong here, but when we did the propositions for the high school, the question of voting on that contract, we had a poster board up front when people walked in, really explaining what this is. So we can do something similar to that to address some of the questions you had.
We can also potentially put some frequently asked questions and a link on our website too, ahead of that as well.
I think it would be helpful to have it right there when they walk in to understand.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the best we can do, I think we should definitely do that. So, yeah, I think the language of this proposition is not clear. So when did the absentee ballots have already been printed? When did that?
Dusty has the timeline.
The
for-
absentee ballots went out on the 7th.
Gotcha, because we did talk at the last meeting about, or at the meeting when we voted on the language about potential changes to that.
And there was a memo sent from council with the follow-up information as to why council recommended this language. And this is what the board approved and the council recommends sticking with.
The language of regardless of the distance they live with the kind of
Right.
organizing. I mean, I think if you're gonna put a poster up, you should define certain phrases or terms then somehow, so that, because that is agreeably and could be misleading to folks.
Yeah, I just think it could be clearer that what we're asking for is authorization to transport kids that live within the 2 or 3 mile radius, not, obviously we're in a small district, a lot of people know that, but we're not talking about distance beyond 15 miles. We're not talking about, I also think it's not clear that we're only talking about this school. So it's,
It's also high school.
so
If you live close enough to Haldane, you should not be transported.
So the response we got from council on that point was that the 15-mile limit does not apply to transporting high school students to other districts that you contract with, since you don't have a high school. That was what we got back from Chris on that one.
My understanding was that it did apply, but we go back and clarify again.
Yeah, that's
So
what
are you reading her memo?
I'm reading the response we got to the questions that I had submitted.
At this point, the board, I know you didn't vote in favor of doing this, but the rest of the board did vote in
Right.
favor of adopting this. So we do need to move forward with this proposition as recommended by council.
Okay, yeah, I understand. I also think it would be helpful for whatever we put up on the day of the vote to clarify that the 16.2 is specifically related to the additional costs of transporting within 2 to 3 miles, because the way it's currently drafted, it's not clear what that cost actually refers to.
That's the next slide. Okay.
No, I mean, in the language that we put up, to clarify what we're voting.
Right, we can put that on the chart that we have for the voters when they come in, and we're going to review that here. And like I said, I think it wouldn't be bad to put a sheet that basically would have the information that would be on that poster board on our website. So if the district doesn't transport students who reside less than the distance from the school, we wouldn't be able to eliminate a bus run, but potentially what it would do is reduce the amount of time that it would take to conduct the runs. So we're currently using a 5-hour workday for the 3 large buses in the van, and we could shift it to 4 hours, and 16,200 represents the annual cost of that extra hour per day for those 4 vehicles. Okay, if this vote does not pass, the district would stop transporting K-8 students who reside within 2 miles from the Garrison school or 3 miles from their high school, but we'll clarify that. And based upon the current count of all of the students K-12 that are in the transportation system, there's 308 students, and the ones that would fit in that radius are 59 students. And this is a map of where they would be. So you have some on Route 90, both north and south of the school, and Upper and Lower Station, 403, and Snake Hill, and some on Route 9 that are close to Snake Hill Road, as well as Avery Road. Number of stops on Avery that would also be alerted. So the vote is using the same kind of timeline that we do on a normal vote. It's from 7 to 9 on December 5th in the gymnasium.
Thank you. Do you have any further questions on that?
Just a clarification. I assume we can still do, for members of the public, they can do absentee by coming to the school and getting a ballot. Is that correct?
Absentee ballot application is available on the district website. They can pick one up in person as well. They can download it right off the website. On the homepage, we do have a ribbon going across. About halfway down, you'll see the orange ribbon. It says special district meeting of the voters information. And absentee ballot application is available there.
Great, and they can start doing that as soon as. Okay.
It's been up for about a month because we can't receive the applications any more than 30 days prior to the vote. So I timed it so that it was on there about that time. And then also sent out a meeting release to the local papers, and we sent notification out to parents as well.
Great. Yeah, I would just encourage, members of the public, parents to make sure they mark that date on their calendar, December 5th, to vote for, to continue providing transportation. It's obviously a significant number of students, particularly percentage-wise within the district. It'll be a Tuesday, and obviously it could be potentially disruptive if that resolution does not pass, and transportation will cease beginning on the 6th, if that is the case.
Just also the superintendent forum that our search companies proposed is likely, they're working on scheduling it for the 5th as well as we.
Great.
So for parents who wish to come and meet with our search consultants and share their thoughts on what they're looking for in the next superintendent, that will also be held here at the school. Also, I just pulled up the memo from Chris. Can you clarify your question again regarding the 15-mile limit? Because it says 15-mile limit does not apply because our high schools are further than 15 miles. But if you live within 3 miles, this would still be in fact.
Right. So I had submitted questions to Chris after that meeting, and she had responded to those questions. That's what I'm referring to. It was distributed in a weekly update. And so in that, in response to, I said, do we also need authority to transport kids who live beyond 15 miles, such as for some high school students? We have legal authority So it could be, I mean, I think we should clarify, but her response was,
Because we don't have the high school.
you would for students coming to your district high school. The 15-mile limit does not apply to transporting your high school students to other districts that you contract with since you don't have high school. So I don't really know the answer to that, but I think we should clarify.
I see. I'm just trying to figure out what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And I think for the purposes of this, it only affects whether or not we're actually asking for authority to transport within 2 miles or 2 and 3 miles.
It's
Whether or
3
not they are-
miles, yeah. So there's only, it would only affect the students. Really, the only ones within 3 miles are Haldane students, correct? We're close enough.
Yeah.
No one within 3 miles of Putnam Valley, even our Putnam Valley residents.
No, it's still too far.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just another comment, the 16,200, this isn't being done for budget savings. It has nothing to do with that. It's just codifying what we're doing, so it can't be challenged. $16,200 only represents 1% of the transportation budget. It's not a lot, but that's our best estimate of what the change in operation, what that would do for cost.
And I would say, I think that's a good point to make in the FAQ, that, you know, put it in perspective, you would only save 1%. However, 59 students may lose their transportation services. And I think, Dan, I hear where you're coming from, to have plain, clear language for our voters.
Yeah.
Because of course the proposition language, you know, is more of a legal requirement. So we will do our best. We'll work on that FAQ, and we will let the board take a look at it and give input. We'll do our best to make sure we clarify.
Right.
Is it too late to, put the FAQ in the newsletter?
I haven't.
No, but in here.
Oh, I hear you. But in the.
It looks cute. But I'm just
In a
saying
week.
there's
I
time.
think we might not be able to include, like in a weekly newsletter, we have a link to a document that explains all of that. Within that. You do that from now up until the vote.
Maybe a call out also on the website, since there are people who don't get the weekly newsletter.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But hopefully we'll, they see it can't sign up in the news. All right. Any other questions for Joe on transportation? Thanks, Joe. Next we have the NISBA convention and business meeting update. Dan, you can use the podium if you want, but you're also welcome to just say something.
I'll just say it. So
So how was it?
the NISBA annual business meeting was really, I'm glad I had the opportunity to attend. It was virtual. It was held on October 16th with nearly 375 voting delegates. For those of you that don't know, the annual business meeting, we vote on non-binding resolutions, which are the policy positions of NISBA. There were 56 proposed resolutions, which the delegates debated. Among those, there was a group that NISBA had recommended adopting. There was a group that NISBA had recommended not adopting. In the end, we adopted 35 resolutions compared to 32 that were recommended for adoption. The rest were rejected. We pretty much voted in line with NISBA recommendations, except on one resolution, which was about supporting kindergarten in all districts. NISBA had recommended against that because they said law already gives districts the right to implement kindergarten. So the only difference there was, should there be a firm policy statement from NISBA saying we support kindergarten in all districts. That resolution was adopted. And then there were several that were adopted against NISBA's recommendations that we voted against. Several of them related to the electric bus mandate. So the delegates adopted all resolutions, basically trying to minimize the impact or eliminate the requirement, or proposing to eliminate the requirement for electric buses. So those have all been adopted. That includes supporting the repeal of the law that mandates all school vehicles be zero emissions. They also adopted a resolution proclaiming support for the requirement that school security guards receive and be required to obtain specialized school safety training, security training. That was recommended against adoption by NISBA because of the potential to limit the pool of potential security personnel. So that I think is everything. It was an interesting meeting. There's a lot of lively debate that often.
Did you get to say anything?
I mostly just voted. I did not speak up too much. It was a long meeting. I think 5+ hours. So plenty was said.
Did you get a sense of like, does that have like real priorities in that list of, 35 adopted? Do some stand out of like, this is what we're really gonna fight for? Because it's a lot of work for NISBA to go advocate for.
Yeah, I didn't get a sense that there were, particular ones that they put their fingers on the scale for. They're all put forward by districts, and so there's a district sponsor for each one of the decisions. So.
Thank you for sitting through 5 years.
Yeah.
Are they gonna keep it, did they say whether they're keeping it virtual?
I don't know. I think it lends itself to easy administration because we all have, voting software.
Good representation. Good representation.
Yeah.
across the state.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I would think it would be a lot easier because most districts wouldn't be able to attend and have their voice heard otherwise. Well, thank you for representing us and for,
My pleasure.
I just thought they learned from us. All right, any other questions for Pam? All right, we'll move on to the comprehensive long-range planning study. Is that for discussion? Probably gonna leave this, or do you need?
Sure, I'm happy to lead it. We've talked quite a bit about enrollment and looking at future enrollment trends and how that may impact the school or the budget or both. So Joe reached out to Western Suffolk BOCES. They do specialize in this area of doing enrollment studies and making projections. They look at things, and Joe can help me with this. We've both been through live births, trends, historical data.
Anything that's going on with housing, they're gonna look at the enrollment in public school versus private school. That's obviously in play here. This outfit has been doing demographic studies since the 1980s. They're kind of they are the BOCES that is known for doing this. And this is who you go to if you want to get it through BOCES. There are other people out there that can do it, but it's not generally as economical as this.
I think the question is for Garrison. Most of our grade levels are currently in one section. We do have, I believe, 2 that are in 2 sections. That's where it could be a budget impact. If you think you may have 30 or 40 incoming kindergarten students, and we have to open up a second section, it's hiring an additional teacher and also hiring an additional aide, and that does have an impact on the budget. So I think those are the things that we might be curious about. An enrollment or a demographic study may reveal some trend that we're not aware of right now. Pre-K numbers and knowing and having a good idea of who's out there in the other local pre-Ks. We're thinking, our early thinking for next year is that they'll be one kindergarten section. But there may be children, there may be families moving in. I'm not aware of any heavy development happening. Any development, those things tend to impact your enrollment. So I think this is a question for does the board, would they like to invest some money? Joe, how much are we talking?
$5,800.
It's $5,800, and that is closerable. We
We get 35% back on that.
So take off the third, you want to make that investment to kind of try to project ahead as far as incoming involvement. Thank you for that.
Have we ever done that before?
I don't think in recent history, I've heard some past board members talk about it. I see Mrs. Green.
It was
Nodding
like
her
a
head.
paper, it was paper method, like just census stuff,
Okay,
but not a formal as much as I.
maybe not as thorough as what the BOCES would provide.
Just a quick question. So, just in terms of the timing of it, the contract, I think, says it would take 4 to 5 months, to get it. And then it would project beginning with next year's kindergarten class. Is that right? So we wouldn't be using it this year for any sort of budgetary
No,
projections.
we wouldn't use it for developing this budget. We would develop the budget based upon what we know is in our pre-K and what might be across the street and some other places as to what our kindergarten will be. But what it does have the capability of doing is if there is a strong, which I don't know that there is, but if there is a strong correlation between live births and who actually shows up here, then that can be helpful. But that remains to be seen. But it might be that some people move to Garrison when they have kids that are school age.
That's my question, because I know later on the agenda, we have the long-range financial plan, which I believe we could have some information back from them perhaps in time for budget
Yeah, I
development,
would say
which
we
might be
would.
more helpful. But in terms of this, if most people are moving here with children, can this study help us with that?
Well, what it will do is it will look at that correlation and see if it is related to people just moving in or has anything to do with live births.
I was curious on that, just making sure that we're using the resources efficiently. Does it make sense to wait to do the long-term financial analysis until we have the results of the long-term demographic
I
study?
don't see it the other way around, because I see it as like the long-term financial, which is really looking at sort of how we're using our reserves. Specifically now, we just had the audit done, so we know what we have in reserves. We're sort of at that point of building the budget out. That one feels more useful to me, honestly, than this does, but we're really looking at, numbers that when people are always moving in here with kids, we can't really predict that. Or the demographic study would be able to, but I also have never done a demographic study, so I don't know what else it could tell us.
I thought the example of the demographic study was very interesting, and it would be interesting to see what they would come up with for our community.
I mean, that's something we do every year. So.
Right. This is something that you may do every 6, 7, 8 years. It's not something you do on an annual basis.
The other thing that may be helpful, so we're kind of refocusing on our primary grades, but at the high school level, what's happening there? I've been told that historically we had higher percentages of our 8th graders moving on to independent schools, and that more recent trends are that the vast majority of our 8th graders attend one of our high schools. That we have the 3 choices. So we're seeing maybe 2 or 3 per class. That's been the average in recent years, opting for independent schools. So they will take a look at high school, and that may be helpful as well.
So are we currently planning on staggering these or doing them simultaneously in terms of?
So
the
we don't
long-term
have a
financial
resolution on
demographic?
like where the comprehensive.
It's not necessary.
Not necessary.
Because I can just do a
We can
purchase
just do
order
it.
for it.
So what we're looking for then is consensus tonight to do this, and then, we can do them simultaneously. I think they'll come in at different times. My understanding from the long-term financial plan is we're approving hours essentially. So we ask a question, we say you go up to this dollar amount on answering this question for us. We want these specific questions answered, which is what we get to do later with that resolution. So,
And this one won't really require a lot of input from from our office or anything.
And they're playing.
It can just, it's just gonna, once we say go, they'll just go, and if they have questions for us, they'll ask, but I don't think they're gonna have.
And you feel okay spending this amount of money?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all in favor of doing them both. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure that, I mean, do we have any sense of whether one would benefit from the results of the other, or does it not make a difference?
I don't think it makes a difference.
Then let's be thorough. I say we go for it.
Okay.
Okay. All right, thank you. Now coming to public comment. Public comment is intended for members of the community to speak openly and voice concerns in accordance with policy 1510 of the Garrison Free School District. Any person wishing to speak shall comply with all provisions of this policy. Comments about specific school personnel or individual students is a violation of board policy. Concerns regarding students or personnel should be discussed privately with the superintendent or appropriate administrator. Comments should be limited to 3 minutes, and speakers are asked to conduct themselves in a respectful manner. The board will listen to comments but will not engage in dialogue. Any necessary follow-up will be noted and provided through the appropriate channel. Members of the public wishing to comment during board meetings are asked to place their names. Town of residents on the sign-in sheet. Commenters will be invited to the podium to address the board. First, Ed Roush. Garrison. Come on.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Ned Rouch. I live here in Garrison. I've got 2 kids in the school. Thank you for this opportunity, as always. It should come as no surprise that I and others disagree with the board's refusal to study the feasibility of combining the Haldane and Garrison school districts. But that's how it goes. Sometimes win some, lose some, no hard feelings. Nothing's personal. But I am disappointed not just in the outcome of the board's decision, but perhaps more significantly in the way in which the board reached it. To begin, the administration produced a report that focused almost completely on the costs of combining the districts. Any thought of the benefits was all but ignored, though the report did nod briefly to the savings that could come from eliminating redundant administrative positions. The focus of the report, though, was on taxes, projected tax increases. There was no mention of the good that could come from making one district out of 2. No talk about strengthening the sense of community within this one very small town. No talk about the benefits that could come from building a larger, stronger district, how faculty, staff, and students could be enriched by pooling resources, establishing academic departments comprising more than just one faculty member, increasing the diversity of faces and voices in the halls and classrooms of the schools. A combined district would mean a board of education on which residents of Garrison can serve. As it is, we have no representation at all, no say at the high schools our kids attend. Garrison is a very small school that seems to be getting smaller. By combining with Haldane, we could grow. There's a future in that. The administration's report was not a cost-benefit analysis, no weighing of the pros and cons. It was simply a tally of the downsides. That's it. And yet, somehow, it provided the foundation of this board's decision. How can that be? Think of what we ask of our own students here at Garrison. We insist that they be curious, we insist that they think critically, and we insist that they explore problems with intellectual rigor. But that didn't seem to happen here. This board used an in-house, one-sided report to justify a conclusion its majority had long ago reached, and that falls far short of the expectations we place on our students. The people with whom I've been discussing this study aren't thinking about combining districts as some irresponsibly inconvenient and messy way to increase the tax base, as a member of this board suggested last month. That's not the point. We want what's best for the kids in this community now and in the years to come, a goal I know that we share with all of you. It's possible that preserving 2 small districts in one small town is the best way to do that, but maybe not. Maybe there's a new and different way for new and different times. A feasibility study would give this community the information it needs to make that decision, but this board seems to think otherwise. A conclusion based on hunches and a deliberately narrow report on an issue with wide-ranging repercussions, and that's what's so disappointing to me. I would like to end on a positive note, though, and say that I was really glad to see this board award student tenure to Ms. Emmy. I think she's great, and we're lucky to have her at the helm, and I applaud that decision enthusiastically. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next item, Lauren Menares.
My name is Lauren Vineris, and I am the mother of two daughters in the Garrison School, one in 5th grade and one in 8th grade. And I would like to voice my strong opposition to pursuing a feasibility study. Although I understand that the intention of those seeking the study is purely information gathering, it will not be felt that way by Garrison teachers, community members, and fellow parents, including me. In pursuing a feasibility study, we are signaling that merging districts and therefore dissolving the Garrison School District is at least a possibility to consider, even if it is a remote one that will most likely not come to fruition. In pursuing a study, we would be saying to teachers, while we value and love you, we are still going to just check out this other scenario where many of you would lose your jobs and all of you would lose seniority and tenure. We will be signaling, of course, the same thing to administrators as well. We would be signaling to parents, especially middle school parents, who really value and want to preserve high school choice. We get that it means a lot to you to be able to choose the best educational fit for your individual kid, but we might actually be okay with sacrificing that. It would be saying to the broader Garrison community, we know that many of you would really struggle with a 30% tax increase and that composed serious financial hardship. But we just want to see what we could get with those tax dollars. I fought tooth and nail for the tax override in 2022 and would do it again in a heartbeat. But even for me, 30% is insane. In the likely event that we need to ask for another tax cap override in the coming years, how can we possibly hope to gain taxpayer trust and buy-in if we are actively engaged in studying a scenario that signals we would even consider something so extreme? I believe this study would undo the hard-won progress that was made in 2022 and would be felt as a slap in the face to all the voters who, despite their being on the fence about an override, still showed up to support our school. We should not even remotely be considering an option that would be such a devastating financial blow to many Garrison residents, myself and my family included. And there is no amount of STAR rebate money that could compensate for that. I stood at this podium last spring and said this very same thing, and I will say it again. We live in a community, and this is just not how a community should operate. We should be considering all the people in the community who would be impacted. And yes, even just a study and not an actual merger would have an impact. I believe that the impact of a feasibility study would play out as teacher flight, inability to attract and retain a suitable superintendent, and low teacher morale, which our students would inevitably feel. Among parents, I believe it would generate significant division as high school choice would be jeopardized. We have such a rare and wonderful gift in being able to choose between 3 excellent and very uniquely distinct high schools. I just came from my last high school tour at Putnam Valley, which is why I was late. And it's amazing what we have in that choice, in all 3 choices. And I understand that not everyone prioritizes that choice, but for many of us, it is a huge deal. In the broader Garrison community, I believe a study would be perceived as our school acting from a place of extreme privilege, where everything else takes a back seat to whatever we want, regardless of whether that could destroy both individuals and families financially. I think it would smack of elitism, disregard, and might even be perceived as an underhand effort to push certain people out. I know with certainty that none of these things is the intention behind those asking for the study. They, like me, are motivated only by wanting to give our kids the best public education they can receive. But it won't just be information that is produced by a study. It will very likely be any or all of the scenarios I just described as well. For those reasons, I think pursuing a feasibility study is a very bad idea. We should be investing our time and energy looking for ways that will help our Garrison School District, not examining scenarios for its dissolution, and in so doing, alienating neighbors, teachers, administrators, and fellow parents.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else who wishes to speak this evening? The sign-up remains open. Okay. Go ahead and close public comment, and we're going to move on. Next, we have the acceptance of minutes. Be resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District does hereby accept the minutes of the regular business meeting of October 18th, 2023, and the minutes of the special meeting of November 2nd, 2023, as presented. Any questions on the minutes as presented? Okay. May I have a motion, please?
So
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. Great. Next, I have accept treasurer's report and claims audit report. Be it resolved, Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District does hereby accept the treasurer's reports for August 2023, September 2023, and October 2023, and does also accept the claims audit report for October 2023 as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So, second.
Do I have any questions on the treasurer's reports or the claims audit report as presented? Right. Joe, any exciting tidbits you want to add on these reports?
Well, I just like to say that we're now all caught up with these reports, and if you look at them, you will see the budget status reports for each month for both expenditures and revenues are also attached.
Thank you. Vote then. All in favor, please say aye. Nays, abstention. Right, next we have committee reports. Courtney, policy committee.
we had a very exciting policy committee. It actually took us longer to schedule the meeting than hold the meeting. But we reviewed 3 different policies, all legally required to update language. We'll have a first reading in December and a second reading in January, and hopefully approve it.
Do you have any questions for Courtney and the policy committee?
Just a thank you for holding a very well organized meeting.
It's all dusty, as always.
Thank you very much. Next planning committee, Jocelyn.
We met in October, the end of October, with James as well, who provided much of the presentation. And I think the biggest news was that they are updating report cards to reflect vision of the graduate skills and dispositions. And I think didn't you just do a training last week, perhaps, with the elementary school students or teachers on that?
During superintendent's conference day, both primary teachers and intermediate worked on them. I think our primary teachers are a little farther along with finalizing the report card. The intermediate teachers, meaning grades 3, 4, and 5, they need a bit more time with the rubrics. So at this point, the recommendation is to implement that report card next school year. Because
Waiting for the full school year.
exactly.
So next year there will be new school report cards, not this year. And we continue to discuss the IB programming because it's going on in one of our high schools, and there was a discussion maybe some folks from the school might attend one of the local schools that has an IB program at the middle school level or elementary school level, just to see what it's like, just as the names of the school. And we talked about some green initiatives that the school is working on, like things like solar and composting, etc. And that's pretty much what we chatted about.
I have one question. Do you anticipate there will be like a presentation to the board at that point on the new report card? To see what it looks like and sort of why it's different.
Definitely, and again, I think initially the hope was to have it implemented this year. I think it's better that we get it right. So yes, I think our staff will need, we don't have a conference day coming up soon, we do have one in the spring. So probably that would be the day where it's finalized and then we can get ready for presentation.
Any other questions for Johnson regarding? Thank you. Next, we move on to CSE CPSE recommendation. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District approve the Committee on Special Education, CSE, and Committee on Preschool Special Education, CPSE, recommendations and student placements. May I have a motion, please?
Motion.
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. All right. We only have 2 items on the personnel agenda. I'm going to split them up, actually, take them individually. All right. Beginning with the non-instructional appointment, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, hereby appoints Jeremy Hartwick to a provisional appointment in the civil service title of Principal Office Assistant at an annual salary as per the SRP bargaining union contract prorated for the 2023-2024 school year and subject to the rules of the Putnam County Civil Service Commission. In accordance with the civil service rules, such appointment is a provisional appointment pending an examination for the title, and therefore Mr. Hartwick is not appointed to a probationary period or a permanent appointment in this title at this time. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you.
So I'll explain that in plain language. When you hire Putnam County Civil Service, there's a very prescribed process. Tests are given typically every 3 to 5 years. List is generated, and districts actually have to go with the highest scoring candidate, and you work your way down that list. For this particular title, which is the Principal Office Assistant, we had a resignation a couple months back, and we're pitching in to support the main office, and this is amazing. So we went through the civil service process, but because the test was given quite some time ago, the people on the list either accepted other positions or were no longer active. So once you clear the list, you have the ability to just post the job as you would any other job and go through an interview process. We did that. We posted the job on OLAS. We had a pretty good response. I want to say there were about a half dozen candidates that we decided to bring in for interviews. We had several different rounds of interviews with Mrs. Amig, Mrs. Cowell was involved, and we also had a second round with other staff members and the person we interact with. So it's been a thorough process. And however, we can appoint someone, as Sarah just read, provisionally, which means it's only until the test is given again. And when the test is administered and the results come in, we must then go to that list. The person in the position certainly can take the test and be for the job, but this is not a permanent appointment. So with that, the candidate who emerged as our top candidate is Jeremy Hartwick. He currently is working in Highland Falls, Fort Montgomery in the elementary school as the principal office assistant. So he's doing this job for 4 years, doing it well. We've got very positive feedback from Highland Falls. And he is interested in coming on board here in Garrison. Before that, he did some work in retail. He worked at Mount St. Mary College. And he does have a bachelor's degree from SUNY Newport. So his good qualifications. His references are positive, so we would like to bring him on board provisionally until this test is given once again. Questions?
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Nays, abstentions. I'm abstaining. Next, we have the appointment of election inspector. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby appoints Lauren Benares as election inspector for the 2023-2024 school year at a daily rate of $200. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions? Good. Didn't have a lot of volunteers. for this. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nay, abstentions. I did check right then, see, school board members can't be paid to do this, but we could always volunteer to sit there all day, right? Just in case.
That's
Add
what
it to your
we-
wish list.
You would get fed. Just feed the
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
All right. Next up, we're moving on to new business. All right. Be it resolved, Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, does hereby approve the new business as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Okay, so we have two items on here. One is the request for approval of the budget transfer. Joe, do you want to speak to that quickly before we move on to the longer discussion?
Yeah, so there's two basic components on here. When we were developing the budget in spring, kind of threw in doing this new special class at the last minute, and just for expediency, it was put in the teaching components were put into the regular general education code, but for accounting purposes, it's better to have it in the special education code, and that's what part of what the transfer. The other part is to cover the cost of the superintendent search firm, as well as the demographic and the long-range financial plan, financial analysis, to cover all those costs. That's what the budget transfer is for. Just to move the money into the appropriate places so that we can spend it for those things.
Do you have any questions for Joe? Next, we're going to look at the approval of agreement for the long-range financial analysis. So what we put on here was that we could go up to $6,000. That's what the board would approve spending with the Donegan group.
Where's that number from?
So it's, we can change that on the
Okay,
website. That's up for discussion. It's a number we put on there to see that's about the range that Joe recommended.
Yeah,
in terms
so
of what
what they told us was, depending upon how complicated your analysis was, it would be between $5,000 and $8,000. And if we're just looking for a 5-year forecast, and we don't want several different scenarios or anything, they'll be closer to the 5,000 number. That's why 6,000, not to exceed 6,000 is in here. So it's just basically done on an hourly rate basis of $199 an hour, and they will do the long range of financial analysis that we asked for. Obviously, if you ask them to do 20 different things, it'll cost more, but if we're just asking for a basic 5-year plan, probably 6,000 should cover.
They can always come back to us and we can approve more. This is just a limit at which they need to come back to the board for further approval. And then part of this question is that they're addressing, correct, Joe? In the scope letter that we see here, listing out different things.
Well, all those components, debt service, fund balance, state aid, and all those things feed into the 5-year plan. So those are all, basic components. But, if you said, look at if we did this versus this, then it would obviously change how you.
So they can bring us back just a 5-year projection, putting some recommendations perhaps on fund balance and to use it. Can we specify to them specific things, like we want a detailed analysis of how to use our fund balance surplus now, where to put it, and
Yeah, you just
how to
have,
maintain it?
yeah,
going
you
forward?
just have to define what it is that you want. We can ask the questions and they'll tell us what they need.
So my question then to the board is, do you have thoughts on what we should ask of them? Do
Do you need more time with that question in order to think about what we want?
So just one initial thought. So in terms of the revenue projection, do they do it at sort of the CPI in terms of what our tax base is? And could we ask them to do like a couple different scenarios where, you know, if we raised tax rates in CPI or at CPI +2 or, you know, less than, you know, kept things level so that we have an idea of what kind of a difference that would make over a 5-year period and where things would stand at the end of that 5-year term?
Yeah, you could ask whatever it is, they're a fee for hire place, so
Yeah.
they'll do whatever it is that we ask them to.
Can they estimate out the cap going forward? Because those numbers fluctuate year to year, but they could estimate it out so you could say work with the cap going every year and then also showing us.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to see a couple different projections. You know, one could be a cap, one could be, you know, at 0, or I don't know, whatever we think is sort of most likely.
Zero seems unrealistic, so I don't even know if I want like.
CPI or something.
Well, I think it's a great idea, and I think if we could get them to get us to the point where our revenue equals our expenses, you know, and so we're not dipping into fund. I don't know how many iterations that would be, but would that be 5 years of 2% increases or 7 years of 1% increases? I think that will help us, especially as a finance committee, planning for like what kind of.
Will they have enough information to accurately do that?
Well, they're gonna be working with me to determine what information that they have, and they'll tell me what data they need from me in order to make the analysis.
But they'll make assumptions on like the growth factor.
Yeah.
They don't
Oh, yeah.
have it.
Yeah,
They'll
they
make
have
assumptions.
Yeah.
So a lot of it will be based on that. But I think having the data, like you're suggesting, you know, what would it look like if we did do an override for a couple of years? Could we ever get to have revenue meet expenses?
I like, instead of saying, you know, what does it look like with 3% override, going back to that question of what gets us to having that revenue match expenses is a good way to do it and see how that.
Working backwards.
Yeah, work backwards from that question, like how do we get to that answer? And then make sure that, you know, I know there's things that are specific to our budget that other districts won't have. For example, we're always budgeting for extra special education students should they move in. So making sure we keep those sort of pockets of extra where, you know, those in that area, those expenses, maybe even ask them to pull that out because those expenses will never match. So we're always going to have extra in there is the goal because they never want to be caught without a special education student goes to the district. Does that make sense?
So I was, had the opportunity to be at the ASBO conference this past week, the Association of School Business Officials, because I think was to present to them. And I was able to sit in on a long-range planning session with recommendations on how to go about doing that. And based on that, what I would recommend is that we charge Joe with deciding what questions he wants to ask the consultant firm and then know what he can do. Because we might be asking things that Joe's like, well, that's something I can calculate, but this is someone where I'd like help. And that we should maybe think bigger about what is our end result here? And I think Jocelyn hit on it, which is one of the big questions we have is what do we have to do for our budget to be able to not have to dip into reserves in order to be balanced, which I think is one of Joe's things that he's been talking about doing since he's been here. So having sat through that presentation, I hesitate significantly to try to in any way micromanage the questions that we're going to ask the consultant. I would like to leave that, just propose to the board that we leave that to Joe as our expert in that area.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
I would just share with people that one of the long-range plans that is available on the website, the Briarcliff Central School District, does a beautiful job. It's in the business office section under transparency, and it is a template that I think like there were, I don't know, 150, maybe 200 people in the room for that presentation. And they were all like, "This is the template we're going to be using."
it's a really nicely put together package, and it's they made it a point to talk about how it's important to have it visually broken up for different kinds of viewers. Some people like looking at the text, and some people need to see charts, and so there's different modalities that are built into the package, so you catch different people's eyes.
The BPD did.
No, this is the guy from prior. But
They have a much larger business. They do their own.
You mean it was an in-house thing that
Oh,
they
yeah.
drive the?
So your business official generally will write the 5-year plan. So the analysis is to help inform the business official in creating that plan. And so the assistant business official is in charge of the plan, and he did share, like, you're going to put graphs for some people and words for other people so that it's able to be understood by all. And he also shared that it's a living document because we don't know what the state's going to do tomorrow. So it has to be done with the understanding that it probably needs to be updated yearly, if not more frequently.
So just to clarify what your proposal is in terms of delegating that to Joe. So we're talking about framing of the long-range financial plan that we're hiring this Donovan to do. So are you suggesting that Joe should come up with the specific items that we want Donovan to investigate?
yeah, so I'll develop a framework and share it with the board, and then barring any other feedback, that would go to Donovan, and then start working.
I would think, though, I want to include the question that Jocelyn had. I mean, is there any other larger questions? Like, for example, is there a way for them to look at some of these larger things that may impact us? State aid isn't necessarily the big thing for us because it's not going to change that much. We either get our 3%, which is like $31,000, or we don't. But special education costs the creation of a special education reserve would be huge for us if the state ever were to consider allowing such a thing. I would love this, but focus on over some other things.
I'm all for Joe developing that list, but I, do think the board has an important role to play in making sure that it reflects our priorities for the long term. So I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to, maybe it's just reviewing Joe's list at the next meeting and have an opportunity to, give an up or down vote on that revised list, and that it incorporates Jocelyn's suggestion, for example, as well as, this goes back to the discussion we were just having a minute ago about, what else we could ask them to potentially look at that might be helpful. And one other area that I think would be interesting is to know if they have specific suggestions, or if they could model out, things like what would be the impact of, X percentage of our electricity is produced by solar. I don't know how much they could do that reliably, but that's obviously something that's on the table. Our electricity costs have been a big part of that. Could they, look at maybe some comps for other buildings and model out a particular percentage of, of electricity generated from some sort of solar installation? And how would that impact our long-range planning? How could we align potential sort of, not that it's that low-hanging, but potentially low-hanging fruit cost savings with, these various projections on increased revenue? Maybe, so to get us to a point where we have sort of a menu of potential possibilities that are a mix of achievable cost reductions with a couple different tracks for revenue increases.
Then we also consider building into facilities money year over year.
Well, yeah, so if you build facilities money in year over year, one of the things that there is good things about that. And one part of it is if you're building a transfer to capital to do small projects as a part of the budget, that's part of the exclusion. So regardless of how much you put in, it's under the cap. Now, you may have some difficulties if you're comparing your district to another one. You know, if everybody in the region, their caps are ending up at 3%, and you want to go to 5 or 6, you may have a difficulty passing the budget. But because it's the capital exclusion, the way it's calculated is it's the amount of money you spend on either debt service or capital expenses, less any building aid. And that's the exclusion amount. So if next year for building the budget, for example, we want to do a project that adds a couple of roofing projects on it, it's a couple $100,000, you can just add that as a part of the budget and do all the rest of your calculations and everything. And your cap is increased by whatever you transfer to capital put in.
Is there a limit though on the transfer to capital per project?
Well, for small projects, yes, there is a limit. I originally used to be 100. Now I think it is a little higher than that, but I got to double check that. But there's a limit on how much you can do per year. Yeah.
So that would be another specific area for facility questions, but I agree. So we want to see sort of what you want them, what you're going to ask of them, your plan.
Yeah,
maybe
and then
come back to us.
Yeah, and we can tweak it and add some more things.
And capital, can I just throw in, because one of the things on their proposal is busing, where obviously that's usually a big expenditure, but whenever the EV thing transition happens, what year is that? Like, how much is that giving?
I don't know.
Yes. So that's not too far, but we don't worry about that.
We don't have to worry about it yet, but you know, that was a big feature of the ASBO meeting as well, is trying to push these electric bus things. And I think the real challenge for school districts in that front is the capital expense is just so much to do because the bus prices are so different. Plus, you have all that all the infrastructure costs you have to do. Yeah, it's big. And I think part of the thing that's sort of being glossed over by all the people that are trying to sell you this electric buses is they don't really talk about how long the batteries actually last. You typically get 15 years out of a school bus before in Northeast what kills the school bus. Right? When the frame rusts out enough and you can't transport students, that's when it goes in the garbage. I would say, based upon the current battery technology that's out there, it's likely that you're not going to get 15 years out of a battery pack for one of these buses. And you're not really talking about, what that cost is. Considering a bus, a 66 passenger bus right now for electric is $360 thereabouts for one of those. And yeah, they'll give you all kinds of subsidies to get it, so it's closer to the diesel bus prices, 115, 120 now. But what happens when you got to replace that? Those subsidies will all be gone. 300,000 to this to Garrison is the whole tax gap.
What happens if you have an event that's, 100 miles away and you have to charge before you come back?
And the other thing they didn't talk about when they were going through all this is what happens if you have an early dismissal? You're planning on charging the bus in between the morning run and the afternoon run. And what about in the wintertime when you need heat in the bus? And that's all, you don't have all that free heat from the engine inefficient, combustion engine. All these pieces.
Wait, are you just saying that it seems like a not feasible thing, or is it more like we can't project financial long-term for it?
Well, I think
Because it's separate.
it's because it's so evolving.
Yeah.
It has a really large financial.
Margin of error. So we shouldn't
impact.
really, waste our time on that yet.
No, I wouldn't, you know, we will, as we get closer, we will have to, even if we are, still using contractors to do busing, we still will have to look at, you know, where are they gonna be charged? Are they gonna be charged here? Or are we gonna have charging for those buses here? If so, do we have the electric capacity? We gotta talk to.
Well, we
Senator
remember we
Hudson.
discussed this when we were doing capital plan and could have done it.
Well, we could have done stuff for cars. but
Not us.
Buses would have been a lot more. Because you need, the battery packs are 6 or 7 times the size. So,
Is there a state mandate that by a certain date we have to have electric buses? What
Yeah.
date is that?
35. You won't be able to buy another.
But to Johnson's question, I think if they have already done, because they work with a lot of districts, these guys, if they're doing that type of modeling for somebody else, maybe some idea of how they're approaching the question. That would be interesting, or maybe not. I mean, it is hard. I'd be curious. So if anyone has any, if you have other questions that you want incorporated or overarching things, we just have them sent to Carl and he'll put together and get to you?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. So maybe take the next couple of days to think of anything else you really want pinned down in this report too, and then we'll have it come back to the board on the 6th. Is that too soon, or do you want more time with that? I don't know what else we have. We have something else coming on the 6th too for you, so. Think about that.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving's in there too.
Just
It'll be
quickly,
fine.
so Joe, is it a reasonable ask of them to do things like, you know, potential cost savings, like this, the solar projection or, you know, electric vehicles? That, like, are those the types of things that we could potentially add on to the list of questions for this study?
Yes, but I would say it's less typical. One of the things I think we should talk about as far as, you know, we did develop a charge for the Budget Advisory Committee to look at, you know, facility, building into the budget, facilities related projects, and specifically solar. So I think we should leverage that, that committee to do the research on that, and hopefully we have some, I believe, based upon the budget presentations and conversations we had in the spring of this year, that there are members of the community that do this or know this process pretty well, and we can leverage that and not pay $200 an hour for it. We just, you know, ask some people that are here in the community and get them involved in the process.
I think it's instead of the specifics though, the broader topic of transferring capital year over year, for not even just the solar, but other projects as they come up, to make sure we're caught. So even once we get one done, we're ready for the next, and it's planned for, and we're not like, oh, the roof is falling.
Yeah.
Would be the bigger question I'd have for them. And,
Yeah, I'm just thinking,
but it's,
you know, in terms of getting some modeling or projections based on some achievable, you know, cost reductions. You know, what would it look like if we reduced our energy costs by, you know, 10% over a 5-year, you know, over a 5-year period? What would that do to our long-term financial picture? That's the kind of thing I'm thinking about, whether that's solar or something else. I don't know if there are other things that might be in that category of things where we could potentially realize those types of cost reductions. Obviously not including, you know, sort of staff or, you know, anything like that. I think we all agree we want to invest in that, but what are the other areas where we might be able to achieve some of these reductions? The only one that really jumps out to me is energy costs, but if there are others, I'd be interested in seeing those as well.
Are we under an energy performance contract with anyone at this point in time? And when was the last time so an energy performance contract usually ends up being cost neutral, where a company will come in and work with you to reduce your energy consumption by changing light bulbs, making computers go off at a certain time, or, you know, switches that are motion sensitive. So there's a lot.
Was that built into the capital?
yeah, that was
Yeah.
part of the.
So that's part of the capital project. So we're already doing.
We did, like, the early part of the capital project was all the light bulbs, all
So
that
that
was
was,
easy.
so that was all done.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I don't know how often you update them.
No, but we did, as a part of this project, is all the, LED and motion sensing lights and all that.
So I need to wait in your arm, this room a lot. Right.
I think one of the things that, the reason for kind of this focus of let's build into the budget transfers to capital is, you know, if you look at the last two big projects here, which was the one that we're finishing up now and the one to build the middle school. Like those are the last two really big projects. And you look at those as examples, you know, they started off with something, and then it got reduced and it got repackaged, and then, you know, and then might have not passed the first time, and then went through it and got voted on. And by the time you did all that, in that packaging, things got left out. And so maybe the better way to, rather than, well, we know it's going to be a certain period of time before we're going to be able to do another one, because obviously we just did a real big one. You have to wait until that debt service expires before you look at another big project. So we do have things that won't wait until then. So how can we do them and do them on a regular basis? So that's why we're talking about these things now, because hopefully if we build these transfers to capital, we can pick off these things in the order of which they're the most pain. Obviously, the roof over the gymnasium is the one that immediately comes to mind. This is causing us current pain. So we need to work on that and then move on to the next thing. And if we do that on a regular basis and build it as part of the budget process, given that kind of habit, I think we can improve a lot of things here and not build up a whole bunch of deferred things. That's the goal, and that's why we're on this focus.
Any other thoughts on this? I think we still have to vote, right? But so please, if you have any, send them to Carl. If you have any other questions that we want to rope into this.
So we're voting to go through with it and
To 6,000, we're approving a
Expand up to
expenditure of
6,000.
6,000.
but the details, we're gonna wait to hear back from Joe. Exactly,
We have some overarching idea questions for this thing to address, and then
how much time does this take? Overall, do you have any idea how much time is this gonna take for you? Not just necessarily the list, but working with them.
You know, the answer is it depends. So it depends on what all the things that we want to look at. Obviously, he's going to need numbers from me on our contracts and what those look like. He's going to need numbers on our enrollment and our projected spends for tuition. He's going to need what our contracts are for energy and other things that we do, and for transportation, what those costs are. So he's going to need input from me, and then he will also be looking at state aid numbers, and he'll be looking at the economics, what the retirement and healthcare costs. You know, what estimates those are going to be.
but is he doing it like the actuary does it, or does he does it more realistic?
He's going to do it based upon more realistic stuff. That what he thinks.
Actuary came back with a 13% increase, and what did they end up with?
5. That which is a good thing for next year's budget. Yeah. But you know, it's a big cost. And we're talking about another thing that we're talking about at the conference is, you know, when you look at BOE budgets, the component of the admin, the majority of that is retiree health insurance. Yeah. So BOCES are the ones that are on the bleeding edge of making changes and, you know, looking at contributions of retirees and all that. So that was kind of interesting too. So.
Just one other question then. So the letter has the scope of services and that list of 6 items. I understand Joe is going to come up with a scope for the study. Is that a revision to the
That was,
scope?
yeah, that'll just feed into what he actually works on.
But it doesn't have to revise this contract that we're gonna approve.
No, but these are very general. I mean, revenue, expense, fund balance. We want to go deeper than that.
But is
The
there,
understanding I have.
so I'm just trying to understand like what paper is gonna exist. I mean, are we gonna be directing them? You're gonna write a letter to them and say, this is what I want you to study?
Yeah. Yeah, and what we'll do is I'll develop that and we'll share it with you. And if you have any things that you want to add, you know, send them to Carl. And we'll incorporate those and make any revisions to it, and then I'll send it over to them, and they'll tell me what they need.
Right.
And the resolution authorizing letter at the end of their document
Right. Yeah, just
authorizing.
yeah, just wanted to be clear that the scope of services doesn't need to be revised to address all of these issues that we talked about tonight.
And they all fall under these.
Yeah, it's gonna affect their revenue or expense. Yeah.
Any other questions for Joe or the motion vote? Again, we're voting on the budget transfer and the long range financial analysis. As all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. We come to our second public comment session of the evening. Sign-in sheet here. I'm going to read the paragraph again. Anyone wishing to speak may sign in and come to the podium. I'm going to go ahead and close public comment again and move on to board member comment and other discussion. Jocelyn.
I want to say 2 things, and the first is just kind of addressing, I feel like, feeling or an image that's coming out of all the discussions that we have about feasibility studies. One of them that keeps resonating from board members, community members, is this idea that, you know, of scaring faculty and staff. And I want to speak for myself because I can't have this board member comment, not on behalf of the board, but I am not in any way in the business of thinking about how to reduce staff. In fact, I think one of the interesting things about all of this exploration is how do you enhance the staff and faculty's experience, et cetera. So I want to make it clear that I would never be doing this to potentially push out or reduce the faculty staff admin that we have. And I think related to that, I think there's this feeling like it's, I don't know, I get this image coming across like it's, I mean, I personally partnering with Haldane is a positive thing. They are our closest neighbor. We've been working with them for years and years, and it comes off as if like we don't want to partner with them. And I just don't want to convey that message to our neighbors to the north, who we send a lot of our students to. It's a wonderful district. They're a blue ribbon district this year. I mean, like they have a lot to offer. And I also believe and have a lot of trust in them that they wouldn't like steal us and dissolve us and kick us all out and rearrange it. You know, I feel like it would be more of like a working together thing. And maybe that's a little idealistic, but like I would just assume that if we were working with them, it would, because the feasibility study would be both districts working together. So I just want to make sure that those kind of images that are coming around, or I don't know, just these feelings are like squashed, at least coming from my part, about trying to get rid of staff, and also about how working with Haldane or partnering closer with Haldane would somehow be a negative thing for my children. On a completely different note, last week, the Garrison DEI committee members met with the Haldane DEI committee members and the Desmond Fish and Butterfield libraries, kind of DEI adjacent groups. We all have different names. Anyway, we all met at Desmond Fish for an evening of meetings to get people together in person. And I just wanted to say thanks to Carl and Dan for showing up. Courtney was RSVP, but had to last minute not make it because of other things. But it was, and also we had Sarah Stevenson was there, and a couple of other Garrison faculty couldn't make it because of school field trips and stuff. But it was really nice. I appreciate you guys coming out. It was nice to have a
There
conversation.
was wine and food.
There's wine and food. Yeah, and it was just, there wasn't an agenda per se. It was just like, let's just build trust amongst these institutions in Phillipstown as we kind of work on broader issues. So I want to report that. Thank you. And you too, kind of. You were, yeah.
Thank you. It was interesting. Notes.
Good.
Sorry, I missed it.
Just to say that I really appreciated both presentations, the opposing presentations that were made tonight. Residents, but they were both done they were eloquent. And I just want to be clear that the issue of scaring people and staff people, that there are many arguments on this, but the ultimate argument for me was the 30% tax increase. My sense was that there was no possible way that was going to ever be voted on by this community, and it seemed to me like a distraction. And if that were not the case, I think that it would be worth talking about. But that being the case, the idea that this was that we lack critical thinking, no, I think that we looked at reality of what's going to happen with the vote and came to a conclusion that made total sense because there was no other realistic conclusion to make. That's my view.
Thank you. Jennifer?
I was just wondering if you were going to give an update on the superintendent search.
I know. My turn last. I didn't put president's comments on tonight, so I usually don't big one, but.
Because I know that.
And I have a couple other housekeeping notes too, which basically involves begging you all to read your email. But go ahead.
So the only comment I would have is I was really pleased to see Joe up at the ASMO meeting, and I think it's important for us to all remember the importance of our administrators having an opportunity to participate in professional learning. And I just wanted to share that. And thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I would just echo Jocelyn's comments. I think it's important to keep in mind that there are people on both sides of the budget debate in this town about whether or not there should be a merger or annexation. There are people who, I think, and who commented in the context of the override, who think that having two districts in such a small town is a waste of money, and that there would be a tax savings if we merge, that there would be savings on, administrative costs, all those sort of things. And then, obviously there are people on the opposite side that think, we need to invest more and more revenue is important. And, there are community reasons to consolidate or be annexed. And I think, at least for me, the whole discussion about the feasibility study is just answering all of those questions with a hard set of facts. And I understand, that there are concerns about the message that sends. I think that we as a board can and should, and it's our goal to clearly communicate, what the motivation is, that, we have had budgetary conversations in this community, for a long time, and the last couple of years particularly heated. And, knowing that, 30% is at one end of what we could do, and it's one of the options, and, that if we got rid of an administrative office, that's not going to result in tax savings. I think that's one important element of that. And ultimately, it's just having indisputable, objective criteria to address those decisions, and also to understand what the benefits of annexation might be if that was something that people decide that they wanted to pursue. So I think we've said this multiple times, but it has nothing to do with nobody's made a decision about annexation. The only thing we've ever talked about is a study. And I think that, that needs to be seen within a broader context of looking at all of our options as a district to decide what is in the best interest of the district long-term from a financial perspective. Switching gears again to what Jocelyn said of the DEI meeting was really great and truly a testament to, this community, to the school. It was great to see Carl there, as well as other staff, as well as just representatives from the community, all getting together for a really productive and interesting conversation about diversity and representation. And thanks especially to Jocelyn, who did a lot of the work to make it happen, as well as some other members of the community who are not here tonight, but sometimes are here.
Thank you. Brittany?
I just want to say thank you to Dusty for our beautiful newsletter that will be coming to your mailbox soon.
Friday goes out.
So good.
She prints them by hand, so.
Dakota helps, I'm sure.
You don't have to, you should have a lunch bunch help. With you.
So half of them can come out and look at like.
Or
Yeah,
no.
only the eighth graders.
Oh, yeah, those are the most cooperative group. I have one.
It's a team that.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you, Dusty.
Kent is not here. So yes, I do have a couple of things. So the superintendent search, we are moving full steam ahead. The ad is going to be posted hopefully as soon as we have approval. On that note, the search company district-wise is going to be sending out over the next week or two a lot of information for the board. If you see it, respond directly to Joanne, please, within a 24-hour, as fast as you can, please, because she wants everyone's input.
If you don't, she calls and yells at us.
Yes, please do this. So this involves checking your email. So because we have the brochure that's coming together nicely, that really highlights what our district is about, to hopefully attract a new superintendent.
That should be in your email tomorrow morning.
And we have the ad, so, but there will be more, and then it's gonna lessen up a little bit.
I thought we were only responding if we had comments. Is that not the case?
I might suggest responding anyway at this point,
Okay.
to say, looks great, or something.
Okay.
Can I respond, like, I'm gonna let Jen or someone else handle the grammatical fixes to the things they send out, so that I don't also spend time doing, I think that the hard part about responding to only one person is like, then it's like the duplication of all of our efforts.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's why I usually wait till 23 hours and 15
You can wait
minutes.
till 23 hours and 15 minutes. I think some of us got, yeah, but just, and then we have superintendent interview dates set. You should have seen them. Mark your calendars. We are looking to add another one. If we add February 28th, it would be before a school board meeting. So that would be like a 5 p.m. start. So think about that. And then let me know if that's plausible. If not, we'll start looking at other dates again. Which is fun. Speaking of meeting dates, tomorrow night we have our joint meeting with our partner across the river, James O'Neill High School. I'm going to go attend. I don't know if anyone else is available to. But I'm very excited. I'll bring a report back. I always enjoy the meetings with them. And it was mentioned earlier that we don't, have a voice on their board. I do go to their board meetings, and especially during their budget process. Kent has been invited to Haldane. So our boards are very in touch with the other boards, and I think they're very open to hearing from Garrison. So at any point, if board members want to have a voice over at Haldane, at O'Neill, at Pleasant Valley, the door is always open, and they've been incredibly receptive in all three districts. Okay, and then just switching gears from housekeeping, I do want to sort of respond to what I've been hearing about the potential for a feasibility study, and just say the thing that really drives it for me, it is the high school choice and maintaining that. While I value Haldane, I also value O'Neill incredibly, and I value Pleasant Valley. I think those three options are fantastic and unique to this district, and that's really the driving factor, even more so than the taxes, is maintaining choice, maintaining access to diverse student bodies. Diversity over at O'Neill is very different than the diversity at Haldane. And to offer that to our students, I think, is important. I also think there's just programming at those schools that appeals to different students. They should have the opportunity to try it. If they want to become part of the JROTC program that O'Neill offers, that's very different from what Haldane offers with Putnam Valley. And they all have success in different sports as well in different areas. So I think that is something that is so valuable to our students, and I really feel strongly about preserving and not damaging going forward. While we always talk about our relationship with Haldane, let's be mindful of our relationships with our other districts. Oh, please.
All right. Okay, but come on. But I wasn't saying anything negative about the other two districts.
No, I just think
Okay.
if we did engage in a study, we sort of start shutting the doors too, and I want to be careful of that because we do work hard to negotiate those contracts.
So I'm a little confused. I thought, at our last meeting, we did a vote that said at this point, we're not moving forward with the feasibility.
That is where we are.
We did.
So we could then vote again, or, I mean,
We reached a consensus. We actually did not have a vote.
we reached a consensus.
If the board feels we need to put a formal vote to it, we can. But at this point, we just had a
Conversation.
Conversation.
Because I know that it's not only us agreeing to do the feasibility study, it would be how they agreeing to do it as well. And I've been following your board meetings and haven't seen any discussion about it whatsoever. So I mean, we can talk about it all we want, and we can want it, and if what we want is the data that a feasibility study would bring us, maybe that's what we should be looking for, as opposed to looking to engage another district. And I think, for me, I'm really interested in the piece of a feasibility study that talks about the potential of shared services and other opportunities, which might be just a study in and of itself that's not a feasibility study, but a shared services study.
Well, I think that we agreed or came to consensus last
That we
time
would
to
look
do
at
that.
shared services.
Yeah.
And that is
Right.
something we've directed our administration to create wherever possible. And then
But I wonder if we might need to engage someone to help us with that. I mean, if we, you know, I don't know that where I trust that Joe is an expert in developing budgets and looking at long-range planning. I don't know that his specialty area is looking at shared services, and maybe that's somewhere that we need to look to see if we can get some assistance.
BOCES do that? I mean, I hate to kick everything to the BOCES.
We get the aid.
What's the next question?
That's who does the feasibility studies, and I mean, would the state, would whoever, maybe there is a grant for a piece of a feasibility study that's not really a feasibility study, and it's more of a shared
Specific
specific study. I mean, to improve a district, I can't see why that might not be something that we could ask.
Yeah, the only thing I would say to that, Jen, is we're not that complicated of a district. We're very small. And we have, I think, come up with some, good examples and models of shared service. Special education program with partnering with Haldane. I'm in discussions with Phil Benante about some CPSE services with Haldane. So there may be more, though. I by no means am I saying we've uncovered every opportunity. So if there is someone out there, I would think they would need to have in-depth discussions with us as well as our counterparts in Haldane.
In Haldane and Putnam Valley, in Highland Falls, at the county, at the town level, at the county level.
Even beyond.
Yeah, I mean, I think Anita Feldman had a really interesting point, like, are there things that we could do with the town clerk? Are there services we could share there as well?
That would be interesting. Yeah, Joe, you're aware of, I've never gone through a shared services.
What, with the town?
Yeah. No, is it like having a consultant come in to analyze shared services at various levels?
I haven't seen that, but I have met with towns and cities on occasion, to talk about, could we share things like, plowing, and what we do try to do, and we did try again, before the school year started, we always try to see if we can coordinate on transportation. So before the school year started, I met with representatives from Putt Valley as well as Haldane, and we went over all of our special education students that we transport. And look to see if we had any overlap of students. And obviously, if Haldane has somebody at the BOCES, they might be driving right past here to go, but we didn't have any overlap. I'll tell you, if you're at BOCES at dismissal time and you see all those little vans, it's like, there's gotta be more collaboration that the school districts could do, with transportation. But we do try that, and we do ask.
It sounds almost like what you would ask a consultant to, you'd bring in a consultant to look at, a lot of these issues and produce a report. That would obviously be, I'm sure, fortunate to do, and something that, we don't necessarily have the resources to spend on. So it might be a good task for the Budget Advisory Committee at some point, to look at, a lot of these things in a holistic way, see what kind of resources we have in the community to, investigate what elements of this could be integrated, like transportation. I mean, I don't know what you could do. I mean, I'm just speaking off the cuff, but, maybe it's something that's a little bit more than shared services and with some traditional notion, and it's something more about, how could we engage the collective resources of the community to reduce, our costs for certain elements of both districts' expenses. I don't know, but maybe that's an alternative that we could explore moving forward as well.
Great, so we're still in board member comment. Anyone else have anything they want to add? It's good though, like discussion and debate is good. That's what it's there for. All right. No, I have nothing else to add. Just keep checking your email, please. Otherwise, Joanne's gonna call me every morning. All right, now we move to adjournment. Be resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby adjourns the regular meeting of November 15th, 2023. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstention. I know.
First one is.
Okay.